as someone who works closly with law enforcement and your ties there, what do you make of what we're seeing? Is this are any of these shootings, these 4 ambush-style attacks on police officers, are any of these connected, or do we have any information that would make us believe that?
You know, we don't have any information right now that would connect them to the same bad guy or the same person. But I mean, I think it's more of a trend. You know, across the U.S. now, we're finding that these types of killings are becoming the new normal. You know, in the law enforcement community. You know, in the old days, we would read about these, or perhaps even watch them on the news once every couple of years, maybe once every 4 or 5 years. Now it seems like it's happening. Just the fact that, as you pointed out, that 3 or 4 of them have taken place in the past few days. I mean, that in itself should be a shock to everyone in our community. This is becoming the new normal.
I don't understand why this doesn't get more coverage on the news. If these and this is not a racial situation, but this is quite frankly the problem with the media is they don't cover the right things. They don't cover the things correctly, and right now they want to spend more time trumping up a transition for Donald Trump's president-elect, the office, and the folks that he's going to take in a cabinet, et cetera. And normally, this is, if you go back 4 years, 8 years, really, to when President Barack Obama took office, there was no discussion and no talk about turmoil. There was no discussion or talk about microscopically looking at every single one of these people that he was looking at or picking at or bringing in. And they didn't really make any real picks for like 4 weeks or so as you got into this whole process. But now, I mean, he didn't have something lined out. So within the first, I don't know, the first couple of days afterwards, they immediately start building the drama and telling the story and building this narrative. Bottom line, what I'm saying here, Doctor, is if these were police who had shot citizens, and let's say it like it. I mean, if we want to go back and look at this, police who had shot citizens of color, we would have completely different coverage of these events, and it's a real travesty because it doesn't matter the color of the skin of these folks. The folks that are in uniform or anybody, when they die and you die at the hands of a criminal and for the wrong reasons, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, it is a tragedy, and I think a lot of what you've said is actually spot on. I mean, you look back at, what the media coverage has been on these incidents. They don't interview the family members. They don't show on camera the young son or the young daughter embracing the casket at the funeral and wishing their daddies goodbye. They don't show the empty chair on Thanksgiving Day, as the family gathers around the table and it's clearly missing the presence of a father, of a son, of a brother. They don't show any of that because quite frankly, that doesn't sell newspapers these days. It doesn't sell the ratings. And people are more interested as to what Trump's next move is going to be than the humanity of it all. The fact that a person wearing a uniform that got up in the morning to do what that person has done for 20-plus years, basically gets shot in a cowardly way by someone behind them that shoots him in the head and takes away and robs every single person that knows and loves that person from ever seeing them again. I mean, it's a travesty. It's a human tragedy when we lose someone that wears a uniform, in the line of duty. And that's why we call it, in the law enforcement community, we call it the end of watch. Because that pays a tribute to the fact that officer died, in their last watch as they're watching over the bad guys, trying to prevent them from killing us. I mean, it's really sad, and I'm glad you're covering it in your radio program, but it's not enough.
Dr. Alex Del Carmen, head of the School of Criminology there, Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. We'll come back with you. I got a couple of questions about what we need to do and what can we do moving forward. And there are some bright lights. There's a story actually in the news this weekend that I saw where a police officer was being attacked, and he was actually saved by a citizen, a bystander. We'll talk about that coming up next. Any calls or questions you might have, Justin at justinbarkley.com, and you can join us in the conversation at 888-900-3393. In for Chris Salcedo today. It's Barkley on the Blaze.
Conservative Talk Radio with Spice.
The Chris Salcedo Show, only
on the Blaze Radio Network.
Steven, you're all coming up. Stand by. Want to grab the phone line with Dr. Alex Del Carmen and get back on with him. Joins us right now. He is the head of the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University there in Fort Worth. A lot of times, Dr. Alex Del Carmen joins us right now to talk about this. But these stories we've been seeing, alarming, 4 police officers shot over the weekend, 24-hour span of time, and one of them actually killed. We're still, we're following the story. Going to bring you the latest when it comes to these other officers in their injuries and whatnot. But one of the stories I saw, and I'm just throwing this out there, Doc, because I want to know what can we do. One of the stories I saw, there was an officer being beaten and attacked by a man in a parking lot, and that man who was beating and attacking that officer was actually shot and killed by a bystander, someone who saw this attack take place. The story that I saw this weekend, if I get that right, I mean that's what I saw. So when I say that, I mean really we're looking at citizens having to protect the protectors. What can we do?
Well, I think we have to be vigilant. And at the same time, I can tell you that most law enforcement experts will tell any of your audience or anyone else, that would be, that would want to help is to simply be careful in the attempt to help, especially if that person is not trained and it can confuse things. It can aggravate an issue. They can also be the victims as well. When law enforcement shows up, they may not know how to distinguish the bad guy from the good Samaritan that's helping out. So the best thing to do is to be vigilant, to make sure you're aware of your surroundings. If you see a police officer in trouble, pick up the phone, call 911. If it's something that requires CPR, if an officer requires, obviously, if you're trained in that area, obviously apply and engage in CPR. But otherwise, it's always best to call 911 when you're in trouble, because you just don't want to make things worse, even though you're very much, or you may be willing and able and want to do good. In that particular case that you're referring to, I think that was wonderful. That was great. It's one of those great stories that we can talk about during Thanksgiving and feel good about ourselves. But I think there are isolated cases when citizens can actually, step up and do something that is going to have an end result that saves an officer's life. But yeah, that is the world in which we live now. We have to help each other out.
What are some of the things that should happen from a policing standpoint? I mean, would you like to see, we've heard things talk about how officers should be going out in pairs now. Because even when you're seeing little small interactions or contacts when it comes to, tickets, citations, that sort of thing, that's where these things are happening.
Yeah, and of course, pairing up with another officer is a great idea. The problem is that most police departments cannot afford it. Economically, they can't afford to do that, and then sometimes practically, they cannot put 2 officers in a vehicle because that's going to reduce their ability of being in multiple areas at the same time. So it's a great idea, but it has to be a transition to maybe a 3 or 4 year program where down the road they may be able to actually provide that dual officer type of service to the community.
Policing has been under attack in this previous administration, the last 8 years. In a lot of ways, federal funding and all sorts of other issues being threatened to these officers constantly being, Monday morning quarterback, second guessed. Hindsight is 20/20. Folks want to kind of tear down every single incident and contact with some of these folks. What do you think that the federal government can or should do moving forward as you got a new president coming into the office here in January?
I think it's important to support law enforcement. Obviously, these folks do a great job. And I always say, according to the FBI, we have over 1 million police officers in the streets today doing good deeds, most of which are never reported through the media. And so what and every once in a while, you see an officer that should have never been a police officer that does something really dumb or perhaps even something illegal. So I think the Justice Department and the government itself, they have a huge responsibility, which is on the one hand provide support, and on the other hand be watchful for those officers that don't belong in the law enforcement community. But I would argue that those officers are, they're a very small percentage of the majority of police officers that are out there trying to do a good job.
Dr. Alex Del Carmen, I appreciate you joining us. If you want to get in touch, you can see Dr. Alex Del Carmen online. If you want to reach out, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll give a link out to reach you. Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.